Hi, I'm Michael. You can call me Mike. This isn't going to be one of those boring presentations. This is going to be fun. So I hope you're wearing your participants. So who am I, and why should you be listening to me? Well, my background is anthropology. I've spent over a year living in the jungles of Guatemala with indigenous communities, understanding the way that they form relationships, build trust, and connect with one another, and let me in. So let me give you some tips on being let into community. So what is culture? When we think about culture, it's like asking a fish to describe water. It's everything. It's everything you are. But there are certain things that stand out when you think about culture, like maybe dances or rituals. This is a picture of me and my sister being blessed for the Su'ultak-a in the Guatemalan jungles for the Maya Hak ceremony, where they give thanks and food and offerings to the nature deities. These kinds of things are what you think of when you think of culture, right? Maybe ruins. But that's like the sexy culture. That's like the stuff you see on postcards, right? Then there's the things that are more day-to-day. Like, what is this? It's a buggy, right? But I'm from California. We don't call it a buggy in California. That's a regional piece of culture. What about this? Peaches, right? South Carolina. You know how many times I was approached when I first moved here and they said, "Did you know we make more peaches than Georgia?" It's part of something that we're proud of here in South Carolina. Y'all. Y'all is a term, but it's two words put together, and people here understand that. That's how culture works. It's regional, it forms dialects. Buggy, y'all, those are all parts of the Southern dialect. It's a regional form of English. So what we're going to explore today here is, what is culture? How is it defined? How do we create it? How do we maintain it? And what are the power dimensions in it? And with that, how do we advocate for others? How do we understand one another? And how do we build bridges so that we can make meaningful connections to one another? So what we hope to do with this video is give meaningful ways to connect with one another. So what is cultural competence? It's defined as the ability to understand, appreciate, and interact with people different from one's own culture. So what does that mean? How do we interact in a dignified way? Well, first we need to reflect on our own biases and understand where we don't understand each other. So what we have is an activity for you. So you're looking at a document that looks like this right now. It's got bubbles and columns and rows based on racial categories that you may identify. And in the rows are areas of social spheres of interaction. Take a minute and bubble that in. Now, what stood out from your responses? Were you surprised by any of the patterns or trends? How do you think this speaks to how much we know about each other? And what would it take to change that? Not fully understanding people who may be different from us leads to a thing called implicit bias. What is implicit bias? The correct answer is B. Implicit bias refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. So what does that look like? And how does that affect the way that we interact?
New research from the fields of neuroscience and social psychology has shed light onto the concept of unconscious bias. But what exactly is unconscious bias, and how does it affect our behaviors and decisions? Unconscious biases are simply our unintended people preferences. They are formed by our socialization, our personal experiences, and the representations of different groups in the media. These experiences act as social filters in which we make assessments and judgments of people around us. Research tells us that human beings have a natural tendency to place individuals into social categories. These categories are often based on visual cues such as gender, cultural background, age, height, or body size. We also categorize based on social background, job roles, religious identity, or political affiliation. The unconscious brain uses associations based on social categories to develop biases. For example, if we are constantly exposed to women as primary school teachers or receptionists, or men as plumbers and organizational leaders, these associations become wired within the human brain. The unconscious brain uses social categories to make unconscious judgments about people who are similar to us and people who are different from us. A common form of unconscious bias is affinity bias. This type of bias impacts talent processes in organizational decision-making, including how we recruit. Managers are more likely to hire people who look similar or with sounding names to them. Work allocation. Managers are more likely to assign key client projects to individuals within their teams who they have an unconscious affinity with. Performance. Where there is some kind of affinity, managers are more likely to spend time informally discussing positive contributions to the team and will focus on development and future work plans. For those where there is little affinity, managers are more likely to question past performance. The conversation will be less friendly and even hostile at times. Unconscious bias often results in a set of micro-behaviors. Examples of positive micro-behaviors include supporting the ideas of someone with who you have an unconscious affinity whilst in a team meeting, or simply wanting to have coffee with someone like you. Examples of negative micro-behaviors include checking emails on your phone whilst talking to a colleague or cutting someone off in a meeting. Often our intention is not to make biased decisions, and through a focus on conscious thinking and by creating inclusive work cultures, we can learn to control our unconscious judgments and mitigate the impact of bias on our talent programs.
What I especially like about that video is that, you know that feeling you got when you heard that British voice? That charmingness that comes with that kind of accent? That's how implicit bias works. That person did nothing to deserve that kind of authority or privilege. But it's granted based on the way that we've been informed on what that kind of accent means. Sometimes we don't realize that what we say or what we do has negative impacts on people. And those are called microaggressions. Those kinds of things look like this.
Oh, you're so pretty for a black girl.
Oh, she has a Jew nose.
Oh, your hair would look so good if it was straight.
Jews are so cheap. Why are you so cheap?
Do you speak good English?
How are you an Iraqi Jew?
I think the person saying microaggression kind of doesn't really think about it.
This person who said it was my friend, and I was astonished that they would say something like that.
You don't want to make a big deal about it, but then it's also you just said something that offended me, so I feel like I should speak up.
Because they're micro, because they're very subtle, they're small, you feel like you don't have a reason to be upset. You're overreacting, and people even can make you feel that way when you bring it up.
They're like, oh, you can't take a joke.
You're making too big of a deal of this. Why are you overreacting?
Don't take it so seriously. It was just a joke. Chill out.
Say oh no, I actually love black people. I love people of color. They try to just minimize the situation.
If someone feels hurt by a microaggression, it shouldn't just be pushed to the side.
It definitely has negative impacts and leads to people disliking who they actually are.
Those kinds of subtle offensive comments can build up over time, and they can have like a deep psychological effect, and you know, they can make you feel bad and they can make you doubt yourself.
We try to just use jokes to like make things less awkward or like ease social experiences, but it is important because you need to like be aware of what you're saying and like who you're speaking to.
Think of what you say and how it can affect the person you're saying it to.
Knowing that these young women at such a young age can express that they have interacted in this way so many times really shows to how common it really is. But what it speaks to is how little we truly know about each other's experiences. So, how do we get to know each other better? How do we connect? Culture and understanding of others is based on what we see, what we know, and what we don't know. Here's the cultural iceberg. On the surface, above the water, you might be able to see people's race, their language, their actions, but underneath the surface, there's so much more going on. There's religion, there's values, there's age, there's life experiences that they take with them. And to fully understand the magnitude of that person, that iceberg, you must interact with them and ask questions. So how do we do that? First, we look at our own identity. And here's another activity that we have called the identity circles. Here, I'll do it with you. I'm Mike. I'm cisgender, I'm Latinx, I'm a hiker backpacker, and I'm married. Take a minute to fill that out based on your own categories. When I do this activity in person, participants often realize how much diversity they have within themselves. Also realize that they have a lot in common. But then I ask, even though you have similarities, are your life experiences the same? No. How do you define solidarity then? Paulo Freire defines solidarity as reflection plus action. So that means thinking about our own identities as having potential power to shape and uplift. As a male, I can amplify the voices of female issues and rights and advocate and be a feminist. And that provides uplift. As a hiker backpacker, for example, I am able-bodied, which means I can advocate for disability rights. Being married allows me access to all sorts of resources that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are fighting for. We need to stand with these individuals in solidarity and use our positions of societal privilege to amplify their causes. Because in some cases, you may be a haves. In 3 out of the 4 of my identities, I have that power position. But as a Latinx individual, I need advocates. I need allies. So seeing where we fit allows us to identify where we can also connect. Desmond Tutu has this great quote, and it says, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have sided with the oppressor. So we must know that our actions and our inactions both have consequences. Taking action is about connecting, lifting, and understanding. We know that there's no way to cover all the experiences, cultural differences, backgrounds, similarities, all the unique experiences of everyone. What we hope is that with this video, you've been given some tools and some strategies to feel confident, to go and interact and make connections with individuals that you may have been a little uncomfortable asking about their experiences. And with that, getting to know each other and sharing time and space, we can create a more patient, more kind, more gentler, more beautiful world that we all contribute to and all benefit from.